As I go through this, we're going to kind of step through time. This is some of this is a 1830s pre-settlement forest cover, and this was based off of General Land Office surveys. But I know we can't really read this, but what it shows is that this area, all this area was really open. They call it it was jack pine, scrub oak, and pine barren, this whole area. This area here, which is that real 200-year-old pine tree, white pine area, this is just, its type is brush back then. There's an area here that's you can kind of see what happens. This was sugar maple, yellow birch, white pine, and red pine. So it tells us a lot. I mean, it gives us it's a snapshot in time, but it gives us a reference point again, something to go off of. Kind of step ahead in time. This is our 1914 planning map. We've got a much more detailed one at the Forestry Center, but it still shows that real open, scattered pine. It shows some burned areas, some large oak, and then this area blowdown, this pretty significant blowdown. That kind of shows maybe what happened to create this young pine. Now we're going to focus on this, kind of what's going on with this open area and how that's changed over time. So we're kind of looking at just the southeast part of the reservation now. And this is a picture from that Hoffman book, and it shows a camp of berry pickers, and you can really see how open it was. And this looks like it's just fields of just blueberries galore back there. So, and what we know from our understanding of fire and stuff that blueberries and to get this type of landscape, it had to have been burned, and it had to have been burned fairly often. This is kind of referencing the southeast part of the reservation. And this isn't an actual picture of Menominee, but it kind of shows maybe what kind of openness you had out in that area. And this is today. A lot of this understory, pin oak and stuff has really filled in. And then this is really obvious with some aerial photo pictures. If you compare this 1932 or 1938 aerial photo to this summer's aerial photo, you see a lot of change. This is really open, and you can see there's just scattered pine in this area. And if you look at it today, it's very closed, and then you can see a couple of the cuts that we've done, which actually opened it up and made it probably more similar closely to what it was. Another significant thing to recognize is the development, the houses. This is Westcott. There's Bass Lake, there was nothing there back in 1938. And that's important for us to recognize, is that adds a different kind of complexity to the fire management and what we need to do. And we can't just start burning like it was done in the past, because we do have houses in there now and other things to consider.
Just one thing, this area right here, we're going to plan on burning that this spring. This one, it's 46 acres. And one of the objectives in there is going to be to keep it open, keep the timber out for now, and for gathering maybe blueberries and stuff. But yeah, I don't know if anyone, we're going This is Waukau County, this is Shaw County, this is Menominee. If you still reference it today from 38.
And then that period from 1928 to 1942 is really where we have some of our best fire occurrence data. And some of the things that are interesting in here, like this fire, these were big events here. I think it was 1934 and 1931, where this was like 9,000 acres, and this was somewhere around 8,000 or 7,000 to 8,000 acres. So significant fires that occurred, and some of this was a result of maybe some slash that was generated from logging. But this area here was probably not as influenced by the slash. This is more the kind of historic burning that was just continuing. The other thing that's interesting about this map is that come 1939, 1940, you don't see any real large fires. They're just spots on the map. And that could have been kind of the tail end of this really dry period, or it could have been in a combination with the fact that we had the capability to put fires out better. So,
one thing about this map, it was produced from the original map over here. If anyone wants to look at it, it has all the wind direction for that day and how it shifted and all that. So it's the original 1936 fire map.
and some of these fires would have been railroad caused and stuff like that. But it's still part of the history of fire here, and it does give us some good things to look at how things have changed over that time. This is some of the physical evidence out there of the past fire events, and this is these are both in the southeast part of the reservation, and you can see this fire scar. And when a tree scars from a fire, every time there's another fire event that comes through, once it's scarred, it'll continue to make more scars, and so you can actually see that there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 fire events on that individual tree. And so it gives us a time frame to go off of. And we're going to talk a little bit about a fire history study we're doing here. Penn State's doing it. And it relates to these fire scars. But that'll be a couple slides later. Then we look at today's cover. And I know this is kind of a chaotic map, but it really shows, and I thank Paul, our inventory our GIS guy, for producing this. And I don't know if it was just coincident, but he kind of made the fire influenced and dependent type species. He made them red and lighter colors and yellow. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but thank you. But it shows that red pine. The red is all the red pine. The kind of lighter red is red pine. Then this real block of pin oak that we have now. This really shows the outline of those old fires. Is where you got a lot of the aspen back. And kind of what we need to know more about is exactly that pre-settlement fire regime, is what we call it. And a fire regime is basically a generalized description of the role fire plays on an ecosystem. And this includes the role, the role that Aboriginal burning had on the landscape. So when we're talking about a fire regime, it's how often or how frequent a fire came into a general area, and what kind of intensity it was. So how big were the flames? Low intensity would just be something that's just real small. High intensity would be burning up the crowns of the trees. Fire severity is like how hot it burned, how severe it was. And generally that impacts the roots and the trees, and so you'll see a lot more mortality of the trees with a real severe fire. And we're also trying to get an idea of historically the size of the fires. And so all these things can come together and help us kind of design projects today to try to maybe get back to those historic conditions. This is kind of it. This is the one photo has nothing to do with Menominee, and I apologize for that. We should have probably used a picture from the Sand Lake Tower, but this is a northern hardwood type forest, or eastern forest.
Did this very this spring. The local guys helped me out. Try to keep pictures from Menominee. The prescribed fire, just say we can use it as a silvicultural tool on the forest, habitat improvement and retention, and hazard fuel reduction, which means to reduce hazard fuels that are out in the forest. Silviculture, defined it, very short definition of silviculture. It's the art of producing and tending a forest, or the science and art of growing and managing trees. And how we'll use fire as a tool in silviculture is vegetation control, seed bed preparation, site preparation, cone crop stimulation, and pine and oak management in the future. With this picture, you could say that you use fire as a tool in this particular stand to put a low intensity fire through that particular stand. Maybe you'll get rid of that hardwood competition that's in there. Here's our current pine and oak and aspen on the forest. If we're going to use potential areas, we could use fire as a silvicultural tool. But that's all our pine and oak currently on the forest today. Another historic photo. This isn't of Menominee, it's Lake States. But again, it shows pine stand, probably late 1800s, open. No real understory or brush in any of these photos. This is a burn we did this spring on Menominee. The picture's taken from a DNR patrol plane as it flew by. They do patrols they do loops, they fly around. So we asked them if every time they came by if they could take a photo if we were burning, and they did. And they captured a really nice picture of a burn we were doing in a shelterwood stand. We got our engines. Obviously the wind is blowing that way, up by the smoke. So we start the fire along the road and let it back in to the wind. And we put engines. There's one of our trucks, and there's one of our trucks with personnel, and let the fire back into the wind to accomplish. The goal here was to site prep it for planting. So, and that particular photo shows that's our control line. I don't know if you can see it. That was our actual size of our burn unit. So, here it is after we completed all the burning. Total 20 acres.
25.
25 acres.
No, that was 20. You're right. Sorry.
The total 20 acres, but it took us 4 days to do it because we took it really slow. We took it, we were make sure of ourselves, and we started with this.
And then we continue to burn this following. This is the first day, day 2. And this is the third day, and the final unit is here. But in this slide, I don't want to get too much into it, but this is 1 tree an acre, and the shelter would cut. This is like 40% crown closure here, and the shelter would cut. This is an old aspen clear cut. And here's some current management done here. I think this is a clear cut conversion. I think this is planted, I'm pretty sure. And then some old management from 70s, early 80s, some strips cut in there. This is a cedar swamp right here. And there's strips cut in there for regeneration. So, and the objective here was to prep this and maintain this particular stand in the pine. That was the objective. And then we burned it. We didn't plan on planting it until this year, I believe, but the tree order, we had excess amount of trees, so as soon as the burn was done, we had extra trees, they stuck them in the ground up there, so that stand already planted that we burned. Potential projects, natural white pine, red oak, red pine, and white pine regeneration. Addressing shelter regeneration issues, site prep, pre and post harvest. What we want to do. Potential projects, aspen management, and hemlock with question mark. Also habitat improvement and retention, pine barrens, savannas type openings. As you can see from the 38 photos, it was really open. There was a lot of open areas in the east part of the res. And we want to try and keep a certain acreage of that on the forest. Wildlife openings for wildlife benefits. We'll burn those wildlife openings just to keep it open. Just the main goal is burn those and just to keep timber or trees from encroaching into the openings. Endangered species, fire adapted species, and prairie restoration and maintenance, where there's a 14 acres. The old up by the transfer station, the dump in the back there, that where it's gated off, that's currently planted prairie grass, restored through the tribe. I think Environmental Services and NRCS did that. But our job in there is going to be to burn that in 3 years, but we'll maintain it with fire once it gets established.
One thing to note about, like, when you talk, the photo up there is a picture of a Carner blue butterfly, and then behind it is a field of lupine, which is the plant that butterfly needs for all stages of its life cycle. So, locally, there's very few spots where there's actually lupine, and it's generally right along the roads, on the north side of the road where it's more open. So the lupine is a very fire-dependent species, and it's adapted to fire and needs that real open situation, and it actually needs a type of disturbance to help it to spread. And so, like, you might get all caught up on well, why are we burning, or why are we managing our lands for just a little butterfly? But that little butterfly is an indicator of a bigger picture of that pine barren, that type of landscape that existed. So you can really use that little critter to see how successful you're doing of managing the bigger picture. If that makes sense.
Fuel reduction, wildland urban interface, or WUI, short here, wildfire mitigation. This is Little Village in the spring, and I think it shows the urban interface really well. Obviously, spring and fire, you got homes, you burn it.
Middle Village Fire Department and Keshena Fire Department on these woody burns, but we're trying to keep them, trying to burn them off every spring. Again, it kind of defines wildland urban interface or woody homes in areas that could burn HFRs, hazard fuel reduction.
And this is, I'll kind of talk about this. We did a risk assessment project where we had, you might have, if you live around here, you might have met the people. There was a Student Conservation Association crew, fire education crew that went around and actually looked at people's houses and gave it a rating on how safe it was or how fire, if a fire came through, how risky their situation is. And so this is just kind of, we finished that project last year, and we're still kind of working with the data to see how we're going to use it. But what this map shows is all these little purplish dots are homes that were assessed, and all of those were rated as high. And then you look at the surrounding areas. This shows our driest soils, our sandiest, driest soils, and then kind of stepping up in soil moisture. And that really, the Legend Lakes area is our driest soils, and it's our most fire-prone area, and that tends to be where you find your development. That's the same situation all over the country. Where fires want to burn, there's generally houses there. So that creates a situation for us to try to deal with. And this is kind of a little bit closer. A lot of this stuff was really focused on Legend Lakes area. We did a lot of Keshena. We know that we have the method. We can continue to do this. We can do it up in South. We should do more in South Branch. But it gives us an idea where we can really start focusing some of our treatments. When you look at some of the red areas that are right next to high risk and extreme risk houses, we definitely want to focus on those areas, especially when we start wanting to burn just south of these areas. And so this is kind of, we'll continue to kind of get this information out. This little block of land is, it's the Legend Lakes, and so we don't really have that much forest inventory data for it. So some of these areas, it might be, the risk might not be as bad as what the survey, the assessment shows it as. But generally, it's a good start.